Marcus Thompson dropped his rake and ran. The pregnant woman was falling. No one moved. The wealthy family in their designer black turned their backs. Security guards looked away. Marcus caught her 2 inches before her head hit the marble steps. He didn't know her name. He didn't know she was watching him. He didn't know that a dying billionaire had spent 4 years waiting for this exact moment. 3 hours later, a lawyer knocked on his door. "Mr. Thompson, you've just inherited $500 million. But here's what Marcus didn't know: the dead man's children were already planning to destroy him. Comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels." Marcus Thompson's alarm didn't go off at 5:30 that morning. It didn't need to. His body had learned to wake before the sun, trained by 3 years of survival, 3 jobs, and 1 small boy who depended on him for everything. He lay still for a moment, listening. Through the thin apartment walls, he could hear Mr. Kowalski next door, coughing. The old man had been sick for weeks, but refused to see a doctor because he couldn't afford it. Below, the couple in 2B was already arguing about money. Someone's baby was crying somewhere down the hall. The sounds of poverty, the symphony of barely getting by. Marcus swung his legs off the bed and stood. His back ached. 41 years old, and his body felt 60. That's what happens when you spend your days doing maintenance at a luxury resort and your nights loading boxes at a warehouse. That's what happens when you haven't taken a day off in 3 years. He moved quietly through the small kitchen, filling a dented pot with water for instant coffee. The good stuff cost too much. He'd learned to drink the cheap kind and pretend it tasted fine. While the water heated, he pulled out 2 slices of bread. The end pieces nobody likes, but they were still good, and spread peanut butter carefully, making sure to get to the edges. He added half a banana sliced thin, so it would cover more surface. Then he wrapped the sandwich in a paper towel, because they'd run out of plastic bags 2 days ago, and payday wasn't until Friday. "Dad?" Marcus turned. Noah stood in the doorway of the tiny bedroom they shared. The boy was 8 years old, small for his age, with his mother's eyes deep brown, too serious, too knowing for a child. He'd already made his bed. Marcus could see the crooked corners from across the room, the attempt at neatness that made his chest hurt with pride and grief in equal measure. "Morning, bud. You're up early." "I heard you." "Sorry, tried to be quiet." Noah climbed onto the stool by the counter. He watched his father pack the lunch into a brown paper bag that Marcus had carefully unfolded and reused from yesterday. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Marcus looked up. There was something in the boy's voice, a weight that shouldn't be there. Not yet. Not at 8. "You can ask me anything. You know that." Noah was quiet for a moment. His small fingers traced a scratch on the counter. "Yesterday at school, Tyler Morrison said his dad just bought a new car, a real nice one, and his mom got a diamond ring for her birthday, and they're going to Disney World for spring break." Marcus waited. He knew where this was going. He'd been dreading this conversation for years. "And I was thinking..." Noah's voice got smaller. "Why do you always help other people? Dad, you fixed Mrs. Chen's door last week and she didn't even pay you. You gave that man on the corner your lunch money. You're always doing stuff for people. But we're still poor." The word hung in the air. Poor. His 8-year-old son had said it out loud, given voice to the thing they both knew, but never discussed. Marcus set down the bread knife. He walked around the counter and sat on the stool beside his son. He pulled Noah close, feeling the boy's small body against his chest, smelling the cheap shampoo in his hair. "That's a fair question," Marcus said, "and you deserve a real answer." He took a breath. "Your mom and we used to talk about this a lot. About what kind of people we wanted to be. About what kind of man we wanted you to become." Noah looked up at him. "She used to say that money is just paper. It can be taken away. It can burn up. It can disappear. But who you are, that stays with you forever. That's the only thing that's really yours." But Tyler has so much stuff. I know he does. And maybe that makes him happy. I hope it does. Marcus pulled back so he could look his son in the eyes. But here's what I know, Noah. Doing good things isn't about getting paid back. You do good things because it's right, because it's who you are. And someday when you're older, you'll understand why that matters more than any car or diamond ring or trip to Disney World. But what if I never understand? Marcus smiled, though his heart was breaking. Then I'll keep explaining until you do. That's my job. That's what dads are for. Noah nodded slowly. He didn't look convinced, but he looked less burdened. That would have to be enough for now. Marcus kissed the top of his son's head, stood up, and finished packing the lunch. "Eat your cereal," he said. "Bus comes in 40 minutes. The Sterling Grand Resort sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds on the east side of the city. It was the kind of place Marcus could never afford to visit as a guest. $800 a night for the cheapest room, $3,000 for a sweet private golf course, 3 restaurants where a single meal cost more than Marcus made in a week. He'd worked there for 2 years, mostly grounds maintenance and custodial. The pay was decent, better than the warehouse anyway, and the employee discount at the cafeteria meant he could sometimes bring home leftover food for Noah. Marcus entered through the service entrance, the one hidden behind a wall of hedges, so the wealthy guests wouldn't have to see the people who cleaned their rooms and trimmed their lawns. He punched his time card, 5:58 a.m., and headed for the maintenance shed. His supervisor, Bill Hendricks, was already there. Bill was 62, a former Marine who'd worked at the resort for 15 years. He'd taken a liking to Marcus from the start, recognizing something in him, the work ethic maybe, or the quiet dignity that came from refusing to complain. "Thompson, good you're early." "Always am." "We got a situation today." Bill handed him a clipboard. "Memorial service at 11. Chapel Garden. Edward Sterling himself." Marcus paused. "The owner, the founder, 91 years old, built this place from nothing back in the 60s. Owned half the hotels in the state at one point." Bill shook his head. "Good man from what I hear, not like some of these rich folks." "What do you need me to do?" "Stand by during the service. Premium package. Family wants someone on hand in case anything's needed, water, tissues, whatever. Just stay invisible and be useful." "I can do that." "I know you can. That's why I asked for you." Marcus took the clipboard and headed for the chapel garden. He had 5 hours to prepare the site, and he intended to do it right. Not because the family was rich, not because he'd get a tip, but because a man had died and his family was grieving, and even if they had more money than Marcus would see in 10 lifetimes, they were still human beings, burying someone they loved. That's what Emily would have said. His wife had been gone 3 years now. Ovarian cancer. They'd caught it too late, and the treatment cost more than they could ever afford. The bills were still coming, $340,000, and counting payments of $200 a month that barely covered the interest. At this rate, Marcus would be paying for his wife's death until his own. But he didn't think about that while he worked. He thought about Noah, about making sure the boy had clean clothes and hot dinners, about showing up every single day, even when his body screamed and his spirit flagged. That's what fathers did. That's what Emily would have wanted. At 10:45, the first cars arrived. Marcus was trimming hedges near the chapel entrance, hedges that didn't need trimming, but it gave him a reason to be close if anyone needed anything. The first car was a black Mercedes sedan polished to a mirror shine. The driver opened the rear door and a woman stepped out. She was tall, mid-40s maybe, with sharp features and sharper eyes. Her black dress probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. She wore diamonds at her throat, small ones tasteful, but Marcus had priced enough jewelry for Emily's engagement ring to know real when he saw it. Behind her came a man, older, maybe 50, with silver hair and a posture that announced he was used to being obeyed. His suit was tailored so perfectly it seemed painted on. He walked like a man who had never been told no in his entire life. They passed within 3 feet of Marcus. They didn't look at him. He was furniture. Background. Part of the landscape, no different from the hedges he was pretending to trim. More cars arrived, more family members. They gathered near the chapel entrance, speaking in low voices, but Marcus had good ears. Years of working service jobs had taught him to listen without appearing to listen. The estate has to go through probate first, obviously. Thomas says the reading is scheduled for next week. I don't care what the old man wanted, we need to contest. Marcus kept his eyes on his work, but he noticed something. Not one of them mentioned Edward Sterling by name. Not one of them said father or grandfather with any warmth. They spoke of assets and lawyers and estates. They spoke of money. They didn't speak of loss. Then another car pulled up. It was smaller than the others, older. A Honda Civic with a dent in the rear fender. It looked profoundly out of place among the Mercedes and BMWs. A woman stepped out. She moved slowly, carefully. She was pregnant, 7 or 8 months along, Marcus guessed. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, flat shoes. Her face was pale, drawn like someone who hadn't slept in days. She walked toward the chapel. The tall woman, the one in the expensive black dress, turned. Her eyes locked onto the pregnant woman like a predator spotting prey. Grace. Her voice cut through the quiet morning air like a blade. The pregnant woman stopped. Her name was Grace. I thought you understood. The tall woman's voice dripped with contempt. You're not family anymore. Grace didn't answer. She stood there trembling slightly, her eyes fixed on the chapel doors beyond the gathered family. Marcus's hand tightened on his trimming shears. The man in the tailored suit, the one with silver hair, stepped forward. His voice was quieter than the woman's, but somehow more dangerous. Catherine is right, Grace. Father made his wishes clear when you left. You have no place here. He was my grandfather. Grace's voice was barely above a whisper. He raised me. I just want to say goodbye. You gave up that right when you chose that teacher over your family. Catherine's lips curled. How is that working out for you, by the way? Oh, wait. I heard he's dead. Tragic. Grace flinched like she'd been slapped. Marcus felt something hot rise in his chest. Anger. Pure righteous anger at the casual cruelty of people who had everything, talking to a pregnant widow who had nothing. Nobody moved to help her. The family had formed a wall between Grace and the chapel doors. Security guards stood nearby, carefully neutral, their job to protect the guests, not to intervene in family disputes. Grace took a few more steps forward. Then she swayed. Her hand reached for a wall for something to steady herself. She missed. Her eyes rolled back. She was falling. Marcus dropped the shears and ran. He covered the 15 feet between them in less than 2 seconds. He caught her, one arm around her back, one hand gripping her arm 2 inches before her head hit the marble steps. I've got you, he said. You're okay. I've got you. Just breathe. Her eyes fluttered open. They were wide, frightened, filled with tears. Breathe, Marcus said again. Slow and steady, that's it. He guided her away from the watching family toward a bench near the side of the building. Someone had left a bottle of water on the groundskeeper's cart. Marcus grabbed it, twisted off the cap, pressed it into her shaking hands. Drink. Small sips. She drank, coughed, drank again. Marcus pulled a clean rag from his pocket, he always carried one, and dampened it with water from the cart. Put this on the back of your neck, it'll help. She did. After a long moment, color started returning to her face. Behind them, the family was still watching. Catherine's face was twisted with disgust, whether at Grace or at the groundskeeper who had dared to touch her, Marcus couldn't tell. The silver-haired man Richard, someone had called him, was murmuring something to a security guard. Marcus didn't care. I'm sorry, Grace whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause a scene. You didn't cause anything. You needed help. That's not something to apologize for. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. Her eyes scanned his face like she was searching for something, cataloging something, confirming something. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus Thompson. Marcus. She said it slowly, like she was memorizing it. Thank you. I'm Grace. I just wanted to see him one last time. To tell him I was sorry. To tell him I understood why he did what he did. Marcus didn't ask what that meant. It wasn't his business. If you need anything else, I'm here. I'll be working over there. He pointed to the hedges. Just raise your hand if you need me. Grace smiled. It was the saddest smile Marcus had ever seen. The smile of someone who had lost so much that kindness from a stranger was almost too painful to bear. You really are exactly like he said. Marcus frowned. Like who said? But Grace just shook her head, that sad smile still on her face. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. The service began a few minutes later. Marcus returned to his hedges, trimming branches that were already perfect, keeping one eye on Grace. She stayed on the bench throughout the ceremony, one hand resting on her pregnant belly, tears streaming silently down her face. When the service ended and people began leaving, Richard approached Grace. Marcus couldn't hear what was said, but he saw Richard's finger pointing at the parking lot, saw Grace's shoulders shake, saw her nod and rise slowly to her feet. She walked toward the Honda Civic. Halfway there, she stopped and turned back. Her eyes found Marcus among the hedges. She raised one hand in a small wave. Then she said something. Marcus couldn't hear it, but he could read her lips. He was right about you. And then she was gone. Marcus finished his shift at 300. His body ached, but that was normal. He'd learned to ignore the pain years ago. There wasn't any alternative. He clocked out, drove his 15-year-old truck to Lincoln Elementary, and picked up Noah from the after-school program. The boy climbed into the passenger seat with his backpack and immediately started talking about his day. Something about a science project on volcanoes. Something about Tyler Morrison being mean again. Something about a book he'd found in the library. Marcus listened. That was his favorite part of the day, listening to Noah talk, watching the boy's face light up about ordinary things, remembering what it felt like to see the world with wonder instead of weariness. They drove home to the apartment. Marcus started dinner mac and cheese from a box, the store brand kind that cost 89 cents. He added hot dogs cut into small pieces to make it feel more like a real meal. Noah set the table without being asked. He'd started doing that after Emily died, taking on small responsibilities to help. It broke Marcus's heart and made him proud at the same time. They were halfway through eating when someone knocked on the door. Not a polite knock, a hard one, insistent. Marcus wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened the door. A man stood in the hallway. Middle-aged, maybe 55, wearing a suit that looked even more expensive than the ones at the funeral. He carried a leather briefcase and his shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Daniel Carter, the man asked. No, I'm Marcus Thompson. The man blinked, then looked down at a paper in his hand. Marcus Thompson. Yes, my apologies. Long day. He extended his hand. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm an attorney. I represent the estate of Edward Sterling. Marcus didn't take the hand. I'm sorry, I don't know anyone by that name. Yes, you do. The funeral you attended this morning, the memorial service at the Sterling Grand Resort. Edward Sterling was the deceased. I worked there. I was doing maintenance. I didn't know the man. Thomas Reed smiled. It was a strange smile, not unfriendly, but knowing. Like he was in on a joke Marcus didn't understand. May I come in, Mr. Thompson? This won't take long, but I promise you'll want to hear what I have to say. Marcus hesitated. He looked back at Noah, who was watching from the kitchen table with wide, curious eyes. 5 minutes, Marcus said. Then you leave. 5 minutes is all I need. Marcus stepped aside. The lawyer entered, looking around the small apartment without any visible judgment on his face. He sat in the armchair across from the couch, the one Emily used to sit in, the one Marcus couldn't bring himself to throw away, even though the springs were shot. Thomas Reed set his briefcase on his lap and opened it. Mr. Sterling passed away 4 days ago. he said. The memorial service this morning was his final farewell. He was 91 years old. Built the Sterling hospitality empire from a single motel in 1962. At the time of his death, he was worth approximately $500 million. Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't understand why any of this was relevant to him. I work at his resort. That's the only connection. I never spoke to the man. I don't know why you're here. Thomas pulled a document from his briefcase. It was thick, official-looking, covered in legal language. Mr. Sterling amended his will 6 months ago. He added a very specific clause, one that his family is, shall we say, unhappy about. Marcus's stomach tightened. Something was wrong here. Something was coming that he wasn't going to like. What kind of clause? Thomas Reed looked him directly in the eyes. He left you everything, Mr. Thompson. The entire estate. Approximately $500 million. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sat down hard on the couch. His legs wouldn't hold him anymore. That's not possible. I assure you it is. I don't understand. Marcus's voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant, disconnected. I never even met him. Why would he leave me anything let alone everything? Thomas leaned forward. Do you remember 4 years ago, a fire at the downtown Sterling Tower construction site? A building under development owned by Sterling Properties. Marcus's mind went blank for a moment. Then something surfaced. A memory buried deep, half forgotten. Smoke, heat, screaming. There was a collapse, Marcus said slowly. Part of the scaffolding gave way. I was there. I was doing pickup work hauling debris. I heard someone yelling for help. An elderly man was trapped under the scaffolding. The fire was spreading. I remember. I pulled him out, dragged him to the street, waited until the ambulance came. And then you left, Thomas said. Before anyone could get your name. Before anyone could thank you. Marcus shrugged. My shift at the warehouse started in an hour. I couldn't afford to be late. Thomas smiled that strange, knowing smile again. That man was Edward Sterling. You saved his life, Mr. Thompson. And then you disappeared like it was nothing. Like saving an old man from burning to death was just another item on your to-do list. Marcus didn't know what to say. He found out who you were, Thomas continued. It took him 3 months and a private investigator, but he found you. And then he watched you. Not in an intrusive way, just observing, making sure he understood who you really were. Thomas pulled out another document. This one was handwritten, the penmanship shaky but clear. He saw you give your last $20 to a homeless veteran outside a grocery store. He saw you return money to a customer who had overpaid you for a plumbing job. He saw you refuse tips from elderly clients because you knew they couldn't afford it. He saw you work 3 jobs so your son could have a childhood never complaining, never asking for help. Marcus's throat closed. He couldn't speak. Thomas began reading from the handwritten note. I built an empire. I made more money than any man could spend in 100 lifetimes. But my children only learned to take. They learned that wealth equals worth. They learned that kindness is weakness. Thomas paused, letting the words settle. Marcus Thompson has nothing, but he gives everything. He saved my life without expecting anything in return. He lives his principles every single day. Wealth doesn't make a man good. Kindness does. And only Marcus deserves what I've built. Silence filled the apartment. Noah had stopped eating. He was staring at his father with huge, confused eyes. There was one condition, Thomas said. One final test. Mr. Sterling instructed that Grace Whitmore, his adopted granddaughter, attend the funeral. She was to observe you without your knowledge. If you performed an act of selfless kindness, if you helped someone without any expectation of reward, the inheritance would be confirmed. Marcus remembered. The pregnant woman falling, the family turning their backs, his instinct taking over before his mind could catch up. Grace confirmed it this afternoon, Thomas said. You passed. He placed the documents on the coffee table and stood. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. We'll begin the paperwork. The transfer will take several weeks, but the estate is yours." He walked to the door, then stopped, turned back. "Mr. Sterling believed in you, Mr. Thompson. He believed you would use this gift the way he never could, the way his children never would." Thomas opened the door. "He was right about you." Then he was gone. Marcus sat in the silence. The mac and cheese was getting cold. The apartment suddenly felt smaller than ever, like the walls were closing in. Noah climbed down from his chair and walked slowly to the couch. He pressed himself against his father's side. "Dad." His voice was tiny. "What's happening?" Marcus wrapped his arms around his son. He wanted to explain. He wanted to say something wise and comforting, something that would help Noah understand what had just happened. But he couldn't find the words. Because Marcus Thompson didn't understand it himself. He just held his son in the gathering dark, the legal documents sitting on the coffee table, like a bomb waiting to explode, and wondered how a single act of kindness catching a pregnant woman before she fell had just changed everything. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Edward Sterling's children were already planning their attack, and by tomorrow his life would become a war. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table with the documents Thomas Reed had left, reading the same paragraphs over and over. The legal language blurred together, hereinafter referred to as beneficiary, pursuant to the amended provisions, irrevocable transfer of assets. But one number kept jumping off the page. $500 million. Noah had asked twice if he was okay. Marcus had said yes both times. It wasn't true. Around 2 a.m., he made himself another cup of instant coffee and stared at the wall. Emily's photo hung there, the one from their honeymoon in Atlantic City. They'd stayed at a cheap motel and eaten hot dogs on the boardwalk and thought they were the luckiest people alive. "What do I do?" he whispered to her. "What would you tell me to do?" The photo didn't answer. It never did. At 5:30, his body woke him automatically, even though he'd never fallen asleep. He went through the motions, coffee lunch for Noah, getting the boy ready for school. Noah kept looking at him with worried eyes, but didn't ask any more questions. When the school bus pulled away, Marcus stood on the sidewalk and watched until it disappeared around the corner. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something told him he should. "Mr. Thompson." A woman's voice. Soft, tired. "This is Grace Sterling. We met yesterday at the memorial service." Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. "I remember." "I was hoping we could talk. There are things you need to know. Things about Edward, about why he did this, about what's coming." She paused. "There's a coffee shop on Market Street near the old library. I can be there in an hour." Marcus almost said no. He had a shift at the resort in 3 hours. He couldn't afford to miss work, couldn't afford to lose another job. But then he thought about the way Grace had looked at him yesterday, like she was searching for something, like she'd found it. "I'll be there," he said. The coffee shop was small, half-empty at this hour. Grace sat in a corner booth, both hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, her skin pale, her pregnant belly pressing against the edge of the table. Marcus slid into the seat across from her. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know this is strange, all of it." "Strange doesn't begin to cover it." Grace almost smiled. "No, I suppose it doesn't." She took a long breath like she was gathering strength for something difficult. "I need to tell you the whole story, Mr. Thompson. About Edward. About me. About why he chose you." "Call me Marcus." "Marcus." She nodded. "And you can call me Grace. Though after today I'm not sure that name means anything anymore." She set down her mug. "Edward Sterling was my great-uncle by blood. My father David was his younger brother. My parents died when I was 8 years old. Car accident on the interstate. They were driving home from my piano recital. Her voice stayed steady, but Marcus could see the pain underneath. Old pain scarred over, but never healed. Edward took me in, raised me like I was his own daughter, legally adopted me when I was 10. So even though he was my great-uncle, he became my grandfather in every way that mattered. He sounds like a good man. He was. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. He was tough, demanding. He expected excellence and didn't accept excuses. But he was good. He built his company from nothing, a single motel in 1962 bought with borrowed money and sweat. He worked 18-hour days for 30 years, made a fortune. And his children... Grace's expression hardened. Richard and Catherine, his biological children. They only saw the money, never saw him. When we'd have family dinners, they'd spend the whole time talking about stock prices and real estate deals. They never asked Edward how he was feeling, never wanted to hear his stories about the old days. She shook her head. He'd tell them about building his first motel, laying tile himself, because he couldn't afford a contractor, and they'd just stare at their phones. Marcus understood that kind of dismissal. He'd experienced it his whole life, invisible, overlooked, not worth listening to. I worked at the company after college. Grace continued. Sterling Properties. I loved it. Loved making Edward proud. I started in the mailroom, worked my way up to project coordinator. Edward used to say I was the only one who understood what he'd built. What happened? Grace was quiet for a moment. I met someone. 3 years ago. His name was James. The name came out soft, fragile, like something precious she was afraid to break. He was a teacher, 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary, made $42,000 a year and thought that was plenty. He drove a 10-year-old car and lived in a studio apartment and spent his weekends tutoring kids for free. She smiled, and for a moment she looked young again. He was the kindest person I ever met. Richard and Catherine didn't approve. They were furious. Catherine called him a gold digger, which was ridiculous, since James didn't care about money at all. Richard said I was embarrassing the Sterling name. They gave me an ultimatum: leave James or leave the family. And you chose James. I chose love. Grace's voice was firm. I chose happiness over money. I chose the life I wanted over the life they thought I should have. Marcus leaned back. They kicked you out. Cut me off completely, removed me from the board, froze my trust fund, told me if I got pregnant I'd better... She stopped, swallowed hard. They told me to get rid of it, or never come back. Marcus felt sick. Edward was already sick by then. Lung cancer. He was in and out of hospitals, too weak to fight them, but he called me once about 2 months after I left. He said he was proud of me, said I'd made the right choice. Grace wiped her eyes. He said money can't buy what you have, Grace. Don't let them make you forget that. He sounds like he understood. He did, more than I knew. Grace took another breath. James and I moved to a small apartment across town. He kept teaching. I got a job at a bookstore, minimum wage, no benefits, but I loved it. We were happy. We were so happy. The past tense hung in the air. 6 months ago, Grace said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. James was driving home from work. A drunk driver ran a red light, hit him head on. He died at the scene. Marcus closed his eyes. He knew that pain. He knew exactly how it felt to have the person you loved ripped away without warning, without reason, without any chance to say goodbye. I found out I was pregnant a week after the funeral. Grace continued. I thought about what Catherine had said, about getting rid of it. And I couldn't. This baby is all I have left of him. She placed her hand on her belly. 2 weeks before Edward died, he called me, asked me to come to the hospital. He was so small in that bed, Marcus, so frail, but his mind was still sharp. What did he say? He told me he'd changed his will. He said he was leaving everything to a man named Marcus Thompson, someone who'd saved his life, someone who'd been kind every single day for years without knowing anyone was watching. Marcus felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. He told me to go to the funeral, to watch you. He said if you were still the same man, if you still helped people without expecting anything back then, I should confirm it to Thomas Reed. And if I hadn't helped you, then the inheritance would have gone to charity. Every penny. Richard and Catherine would have gotten nothing either way. Grace met his eyes. Edward wanted to make sure you were real, that your kindness wasn't an act, and you passed his test without even knowing you were taking it. Marcus sat in silence, trying to process everything she'd told him. "Why didn't you keep it?" he finally asked. "You're his family. You loved him. You should have that money." Grace shook her head slowly. "Edward knew I didn't need money to be a good person. I already am one. But he knew you needed it. Not because you're greedy, because you're struggling. Because you have a son who needs things you can't give him. Because you've been working yourself to death for years, and you deserve to catch a break." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. It was sealed with Marcus's name written across the front in shaky handwriting. "He asked me to give you this, if everything went the way he hoped." Marcus took the envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper handwritten. He began to read. "Marcus, if you're reading this, it means Grace confirmed you're still the man I believed you to be. I know my family will fight you. They'll say you don't deserve this. But let me tell you something. I spent my whole life making money. I thought that's what mattered. I thought if I built something big enough, my children would respect me. They didn't. They just waited for me to die so they could take what I'd built." Marcus had to stop. His vision was blurring. "You saved my life and didn't ask for anything. You've lived your whole life helping people who can't help you back. That's not weakness. That's strength. This inheritance is yours because you'll do what I couldn't. You'll use it to make the world better, not just yourself richer." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and kept reading. "Don't refuse this gift because you're afraid. Accept it because your son deserves a father who doesn't have to work 3 jobs, because people like you deserve to win sometimes. I trust you, Marcus. Now trust yourself. Edward Sterling." Marcus set the letter down on the table. He couldn't see clearly anymore. Grace reached across and took his hand. "He loved you like a son," she said quietly. "He was right about you." They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the morning traffic picked up. People walked past the coffee shop windows, going about their ordinary lives, unaware that inside a groundskeeper was holding a letter from a dead billionaire who had believed in him. Then Grace's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went pale. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "Richard." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He knows I met with you. He's furious." "How did he find out?" "I don't know, but it doesn't matter." She looked up at Marcus with something like fear in her eyes. "They're coming for you. Richard and Catherine both. They've already hired lawyers. They're going to fight this with everything they have. Let them." "You don't understand." Grace's hand tightened on his. "They're not just going to fight in court. They're going to make your life a living hell. They'll dig up everything about you. They'll attack your character, your history, your fitness as a parent. They'll try to prove you're not worthy of Edward's legacy." Marcus thought about Noah, about the small apartment, about the bills piling up on the kitchen counter. "I don't care what they do to me," he said, "but my son, your son, is exactly why they'll come after you. Because they know he's your weakness. They know if they threaten him, you'll fold." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, something harder than fear. "I've spent my whole life folding," he said slowly. "Keeping my head down, not making waves, accepting whatever life threw at me because I didn't think I deserved better." He looked at Grace. "I'm done folding." Grace studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Good. Because they're going to test that, starting today." She wasn't wrong. That afternoon, someone knocked on Marcus's apartment door. Hard, angry. He opened it to find two people standing in the hallway. The tall woman from the funeral, Catherine, and the silver-haired man, Richard. They didn't wait to be invited in. Catherine pushed past Marcus like he was a servant who'd forgotten his place. "So this is where you live," she said, looking around with obvious disgust. "Charming." Richard followed her, calmer, but somehow more dangerous. He looked at Marcus the way a man might examine an insect before crushing it. "Mr. Thompson, we need to talk." "I don't think we do." Catherine laughed. It was sharp ugly. "You think you're someone now? A groundskeeper who digs holes for a living? You think you can just take our family's fortune?" "I didn't take anything," Marcus said. "Edward gave it. Our father was dying." Richard's voice was quiet, controlled. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was manipulated. By who? By me. I never even met him. That's exactly the problem. Richard stepped closer. Marcus didn't step back. "My father built that company from nothing. Do you understand that he started with a single motel and turned it into an empire? That's his legacy. That's our family's legacy. And you think you can just walk in and take it because you pulled him out of a fire 4 years ago? I didn't ask for any of this." "Then refuse it." Catherine's voice was cold. "Sign the papers, give it back, walk away." Marcus looked at both of them. He saw their anger that was obvious. But underneath it, he saw something else. Pain. The kind that came from feeling unloved by someone you desperately wanted to impress. "Your father didn't leave you the money because he didn't love you," Marcus said slowly. Richard's face tightened. "Excuse me. He left it to me because he wanted you to learn something. He wanted you to see what money can do when it's in the hands of someone who doesn't worship it." "Don't you dare lecture us about our father." Catherine's voice was shaking now. "You didn't know him. You didn't spend 50 years trying to earn his approval. You didn't watch him give everything to his company while we waited for a single word of praise." "Maybe that's the point," Marcus said. "Maybe he saw that you were waiting for what you could get from him instead of who he actually was." Richard took a step back. His composure cracked just for a moment before he rebuilt it. "We're going to fight this," he said. "We have lawyers, resources. You'll spend years in court. You'll lose everything trying to defend this inheritance." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Richard's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "We know things about you, Mr. Thompson. We know about the medical bills you can't pay. We know about the jobs you've lost. We know about the struggles you've had since your wife died. How do you think a court will see you, a man who can barely keep his own life together, suddenly inheriting $500 million? Marcus felt his hands clench at his sides. "Get out of my apartment." "We're going," Catherine said. "But this isn't over, not by a long shot." They left. The door slammed behind them. Marcus stood in the silence, his heart pounding. Over the next week, things got worse. The neighbors started whispering whenever Marcus walked by. People who'd been friendly for years suddenly avoided eye contact. Someone left a note under his door, "Gold-digging scum." His landlord called to say rent was going up. $400 more a month, starting immediately. When Marcus pointed out that his lease didn't allow for mid-term increases, the landlord just said, "So sue me," and hung up. At the resort, his supervisor Bill pulled him aside. "I'm getting pressure from upstairs," Bill said. His face was troubled. "Someone's asking questions about you, about your work history, your background, whether you've ever had any disciplinary issues." "I've never had a single complaint." "I know that. You know that. But whoever's asking doesn't care about the truth. They're looking for ammunition." Marcus understood. The Sterlings were already moving. But the worst part came 3 days later when Noah got off the school bus with tears streaming down his face. Marcus knelt beside him on the sidewalk. "What happened, bud?" "Kids at school." Noah's voice was thick with sobs. "They said you're a bad person." They said you tricked an old man to steal his money. They said we're thieves." Marcus felt his heart crack open. "That's not true. You know that's not true." "I know, Dad." Noah looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "But why are they saying it? Why is everyone so mean now?" Marcus pulled his son into his arms and held him tight. "Because sometimes when people are scared or angry, they say things that aren't true. They believe lies because lies are easier than thinking for themselves." "But what did we do wrong?" "Nothing, son. We didn't do anything wrong." That night, after Noah was asleep, Marcus sat alone in the darkness. He thought about walking away, about going back to the way things were. Poor but peaceful, struggling but safe. He picked up his phone and called Thomas Reed. "I can't do this," he said when the lawyer answered. "I can't let my son suffer because of money I never asked for." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "This is exactly what Edward feared would happen." "What do you mean?" "He knew his children would come after you. He knew they'd try to make you feel small, unworthy, like you didn't deserve what he gave you. That's why he left the video." Marcus frowned. "What video?" "Grace has it. He made it 3 days before he died. He told her to show it to you if you ever doubted yourself." Marcus hung up and called Grace. She answered on the first ring. "I was waiting for you to call," she said. "How bad is it?" "Bad. They're going after my son now." He heard her sharp intake of breath. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." She arrived carrying a small USB drive. Her face was drawn, worried. "He made this 3 days before he died," she said, handing it to Marcus. "He was so weak he could barely sit up, but he insisted." Marcus plugged the drive into his laptop. The screen flickered, loaded. Then Edward Sterling appeared. He was thin, his skin gray, an oxygen tube running to his nose. He looked like death was already sitting beside him. But his eyes were alive. Sharp. Determined. "Marcus." Edward's voice was weak but steady. "If you're watching this, it means my children came after you. It means they tried to make you quit." Marcus leaned closer to the screen. "I'm sorry for that. I raised them wrong. I gave them everything except the one thing they needed, the understanding that wealth without character is just greed with a bigger bank account." Edward coughed, winced, continued. "You don't know me, but I know you. I watched you for 4 years. I saw you give your last $20 to a homeless veteran. I saw you work double shifts so your son could have new shoes. I saw you fix an old woman's leaking roof for free because she reminded you of your mother." Marcus's vision blurred. "I was rich my whole life, but I was poor where it mattered. You're the opposite. You have nothing, but you're rich in every way that counts." Edward leaned toward the camera. His eyes seemed to look directly into Marcus's soul. "This money is yours because I trust you to do what I never could. Use it to help people. Use it to show my children what I failed to teach them. Don't let them scare you away. Don't let them make you feel unworthy." His voice dropped. "You saved my life twice, Marcus. Once from fire, and once from dying knowing I'd left everything to people who didn't deserve it." Edward's face filled the screen. "Be brave. For your son. For yourself. For me." The video ended. Marcus sat in the silence, tears running down his face. He didn't try to stop them. Noah appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, why are you crying?" Marcus opened his arms. Noah ran to him. "I'm okay, buddy," he whispered into his son's hair. "I just missed someone I never got to meet." Grace stood by the door crying too. The next morning, Marcus called Thomas Reed. "I'm accepting the inheritance," he said. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway. Not for me. For Edward. He trusted me. I won't let him down. The Sterling family won't stop." "I know." Marcus looked at Noah, who was eating cereal at the kitchen table. "But I'm not running anymore." He hung up. Noah looked up. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" Marcus sat down across from his son. Yeah, bud, we are. It might get hard. People might say mean things, but we're going to be okay because we know who we are, and nobody can take that away. Noah smiled. It was small, uncertain, but real. Marcus smiled back. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Thomas Reed scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday. Not a courtroom, he'd insisted on that. A conference room at his law firm Neutral Ground. Both sides present their case, Thomas had explained on the phone. No judges, no jury, just conversation. Sometimes that's enough to avoid years of litigation. Marcus doubted it would be enough. He'd seen the look in Richard and Catherine's eyes. They weren't interested in conversation. They wanted blood. But he agreed anyway. Because running wasn't an option anymore. The morning of the meeting, Marcus woke early. He showered, shaved carefully, and put on the only suit he owned, the one he'd bought for Emily's funeral. It was 3 years old, and slightly too tight across the shoulders now, but it was clean and pressed, and it would have to do. Noah watched him from the bedroom doorway. You look nice, Dad. Thanks, bud. Are you scared? Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with his son. A little. But that's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you run away. It means you do the scary thing anyway. Mom used to say that. I know, she taught me. Noah hugged him tight. Good luck, Dad. I don't need luck. Marcus kissed the top of his son's head. I've got something better. I've got you. The law firm occupied the top floor of a building downtown. Marcus had never been inside a place like this. Marble floors, leather furniture, receptionists who looked like they belonged in magazines. Everything screamed money and power. He felt like an imposter, like someone who'd wandered into a world where he didn't belong. Then he remembered Edward's letter. People like you deserve to win sometimes. He straightened his shoulders and walked in. Thomas Reed met him in the lobby. The lawyer looked tired. Marcus wondered how much pressure the Sterling family had been putting on him over the past week. They're already here, Thomas said quietly. Richard, Catherine, and 3 of their attorneys. Grace is waiting inside too. 3 lawyers. They want to intimidate you, show you how outmatched you are. Is it working? Thomas smiled slightly. You tell me. Marcus thought about Noah, about Emily, about the promise he'd made to himself to stop folding. No, he said. It's not. The conference room was enormous, dominated by a long mahogany table. Windows lined one wall, offering a view of the city skyline. Catherine sat at the far end, her posture rigid, her face cold. Richard was beside her, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. 3 men in identical dark suits flanked them, the lawyers Marcus assumed. Grace was already there, sitting near Thomas's end of the table. She gave Marcus a small nod. She looked pale, nervous, but determined. Marcus took the seat across from Richard. He could feel everyone's eyes on him, measuring him, judging him, calculating. Thomas cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss the terms of Edward Sterling's will and the distribution of his estate. Mr. Thompson has accepted the inheritance. The Sterling family has requested this meeting to voice their concerns. Catherine didn't wait for him to finish. Our concern is simple, she said. Her voice was ice. This man has no right to our father's fortune. He's a stranger, a groundskeeper. He doesn't understand what our father built or what it means to our family. Edward chose me, Marcus said quietly. I didn't ask for this. You manipulated Grace. Catherine's eyes flicked to her cousin with contempt. You knew she'd confirm whatever you wanted. You played the noble poor man caught a pregnant woman when she fainted and collected your reward. That's not what happened. Grace's voice was sharp. I confirmed the truth, that Marcus helped me when no one else did, when you turned your back on me. Catherine's face flushed. You made your choice when you left the family. You chose a school teacher over your own blood. I chose love over money. I chose to live my own life instead of the one you dictated, and I'd make the same choice again 1,000 times. Ladies. Richard held up a hand. His voice was calm, almost bored. This isn't productive. He turned to Marcus. His eyes were steady, appraising. Let me ask you something, Mr. Thompson. What do you plan to do with $500 million? Do you have any idea how to manage that kind of wealth? Marcus met his gaze. No, I don't. Then, how can you possibly think you're capable of honoring our father's legacy? Edward didn't leave me the estate to honor his legacy, Marcus said. He left it to me to create a new one. The room went still. What does that mean? Richard asked. It means I'm not going to run your company. I'm not going to pretend I know how to manage real estate or investments. But I know how to help people, and that's what your father wanted. Catherine laughed. It was harsh mocking. Help people, with our money. With his money, Marcus corrected. He earned it. He decided what to do with it, and he chose this. Richard leaned back in his chair. He studied Marcus for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Not friendliness, nothing close to that, but something like curiosity. Tell me about the day you saved our father. Marcus hadn't expected that. I don't remember much, he said slowly. There was a fire at a construction site, the Sterling Tower project downtown. I was working cleanup hauling debris for extra cash. I heard someone screaming. You ran into a burning building. Part of the scaffolding had collapsed. There was a man trapped underneath. I didn't think about it. I just reacted. You pulled him out, dragged him to the street, waited for the ambulance. Richard's voice was flat, reciting facts. Then you walked away. Didn't leave your name. Didn't ask for anything. I had to get to my other job. My shift at the warehouse started in an hour. I couldn't afford to be late. Richard was quiet for a moment. You saved an old man's life, he said finally. And then you went back to loading boxes for minimum wage. That's right. Most people would have stayed, would have made sure he knew who saved him, would have expected something in return. I didn't save him to get something back. Marcus's voice was steady. I saved him because it was the right thing to do. The silence stretched. One of the Sterling lawyers started to speak, but Richard raised a hand to stop him. Then Grace spoke. He saved my father too. Everyone turned to look at her. Catherine's face went white. What? Grace's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. 3 years ago, there was a motorcycle accident near Lincoln Elementary School. My father was riding home from the doctor's office. A car ran a stop sign and hit him. He went down hard, couldn't move. He was lying in the middle of the street. Marcus felt a jolt of recognition. The memory came flooding back, fragmented, buried under years of exhaustion and grief. A truck was coming, Grace continued. My father couldn't get up. He was going to die. And then a man ran into the street and dragged him to safety. A man in work clothes. He stayed until the ambulance came, made sure my father was okay. And then he left before anyone could thank him. She looked at Marcus with tears streaming down her face. That was you. That man was my father. David Sterling, Edward's brother. Marcus stared at her. The memory was clearer now. He'd been walking to pick up Noah from school. He'd heard the crash, seen the man lying in the street, seen the truck coming. He hadn't thought. He'd just moved. It had been 3 weeks after Emily died. He'd been numb, moving through the world on autopilot. But when he saw that man in danger, something in him had woken up. I didn't know, Marcus said. I didn't know he was related to Edward. I didn't know he was anyone important. That's exactly the point. Grace's voice broke. You didn't help them because of who they were. You helped them because they needed help, because that's who you are. Richard was staring at Marcus like he was seeing him for the first time. You saved both of them, he said slowly. My father and my uncle. And you never told anyone. I didn't know they were related, Marcus repeated. I didn't know it mattered. It matters. Richard's voice was strange, rough, like something was stuck in his throat. It matters more than you know. Catherine stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor. This is ridiculous, she said. So he saved a few people. That doesn't give him the right to our inheritance. That doesn't make him family. Sit down, Catherine. Richard's voice was quiet but firm. Don't tell me what to do. This man is trying to steal everything our father built, and you're sitting here having a conversation with him like he's an equal. He is an equal. Richard looked at his sister. Maybe more than an equal. When was the last time either of us helped anyone without expecting something in return? Catherine's mouth opened, but no words came out. When was the last time we visited Father in the hospital? Richard continued. Not to talk about the will or the company or what we'd inherit. Just to sit with him. Just to tell him we loved him. That's not fair. It's completely fair, and it's the truth. Richard turned back to Marcus. What are you going to do with the money? Tell me honestly. Marcus took a breath. My son needs surgery, he said. He has a heart condition. It's not life-threatening yet, but it will be. The surgery costs more than I'll make in 20 years, so first, I'll fix that. He paused. Then I'll pay off my debts. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. The medical bills are still coming. I owe more than $300,000. Catherine made a small sound, surprise or disgust Marcus couldn't tell. After that, I'll buy a small house. Something with a yard where Noah can play. Nothing fancy, just a place that's ours. And the rest? Richard asked. There'll be hundreds of millions left. Marcus looked around the table. At Catherine's cold fury. At Richard's guarded curiosity. At Grace's tearful hope. At the lawyers with their expensive suits and neutral expressions. Everything else goes into a foundation, he said. The Edward Sterling Foundation. It'll help single parents who are working 3 jobs and still can't make rent. It'll help kids who need medical care their families can't afford. It'll help people like me. People who are trying their best but drowning anyway. The silence was absolute. You're giving it away. Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper. Almost all of it. Yes. Why? Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw the confusion underneath the anger. Saw the woman who'd spent her whole life measuring her worth in dollars and couldn't understand someone who measured it differently. Because I don't need that much money to be happy, he said. I just need enough to take care of my son and help other people do the same. Catherine sat back down. The fight seemed to drain out of her. We failed him, she said quietly. So quietly, Marcus almost didn't hear it. Didn't we, our own father? And we failed him. No one answered. Grace moved to her cousin's side. She put a hand on Catherine's shoulder. You didn't fail him, she said gently. You just forgot what mattered. But it's not too late to remember. Catherine looked up at her. The hostility was gone from her eyes, replaced by something raw and painful. I was so cruel to you, Catherine whispered. When you left. When James died. I didn't even call. I didn't even send flowers. I know. I'm sorry. The words came out broken, like Catherine had never said them before, and didn't know how they were supposed to sound. I'm so sorry, Grace. Grace's tears fell freely now. I forgive you. The two women held each other in the middle of the conference room crying, while the lawyers sat in uncomfortable silence. Richard stood. He walked slowly around the table until he was standing in front of Marcus. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Richard extended his hand. My father was right about you, he said. And I'm sorry for doubting that. Marcus stood and shook his hand. Richard's grip was firm, sincere. The company, Richard said, turning to Thomas. What happens to it? Mr. Sterling specified that operational control remains with the family, Thomas explained. Marcus inherits the assets, but you retain management of Sterling Properties. Richard nodded slowly. Then he looked back at Marcus. I have a condition. What kind of condition? That we run it the way you'd run it. Richard's voice was steady now, the coldness gone. With integrity. With care for the people who work for us. The way our father wanted, but never enforced. He took a breath. You teach us how to be better, and we'll make sure the company reflects that. Marcus studied the man in front of him, saw the pride that was slowly cracking, saw the willingness to change fragile but real. That's not something I can do alone, Marcus said. I know, none of us can. That's the point. Richard glanced at his sister, who was still holding Grace. We've been doing everything alone for too long, competing with each other, fighting over scraps of approval from a man who didn't know how to give it. Maybe it's time we tried something different. Like what? Like working together, like actually being a family instead of just sharing a last name. Catherine pulled away from Grace and walked over. Her makeup was smeared, her composure shattered, but something in her eyes had changed. I don't know how to be different, she said to Marcus. I've been this way my whole life. I've measured everything by money and status and what I could get from people. I don't know how to be the kind of person my father wanted me to be. Neither did he, Marcus said. Not at first. He learned, and he hoped you would too. How do we learn something like that? Marcus thought about Noah, about the question his son had asked that morning a week ago, a lifetime ago. Why do you help people if we're still poor? You start small, he said. You help someone without expecting anything back, and then you do it again, and eventually it becomes who you are. Catherine wiped her eyes. That sounds too simple. Simple isn't the same as easy. She almost smiled. It was the first genuine expression Marcus had seen on her face. Our father really did know you, didn't he? Even though you never met. I guess he did. Thomas cleared his throat. If we're in agreement, I'll draw up the revised terms. Marcus accepts the inheritance. Richard and Catherine retain operational control of Sterling Properties with the understanding that they'll work with Marcus on the foundation and company reforms. There's one more thing, Grace said. Everyone turned to her. She was still holding one of Catherine's hands, but her eyes were on Marcus. The baby, she said. I want you to be his godfather. Marcus felt something catch in his chest. Grace, you don't have to. I want to. James would have wanted to. You're the reason I was there to confirm the inheritance. You're the reason any of this happened. And you're the kind of man I want my son to look up to. His godfather, Marcus repeated. His godfather. He thought about Edward's letter, about the responsibility he'd accepted, about the family he'd never expected to gain. I'd be honored, he said. Grace smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her since that day at the coffee shop. Then it's settled, Thomas said. I'll have the paperwork ready by end of week. Marcus, you'll need to come in to sign. Richard, Catherine, same for you. The meeting was over, but nobody moved to leave. Richard walked to the window and looked out at the city. He built all of this, he said quietly. Started with nothing and built an empire. And all I ever saw was what I could get from him. We all did, Catherine said. Except Grace. And look how we treated her. I wasn't perfect, Grace said. I judged you too. I thought choosing love meant I was better than you, but I was just running away from the parts of myself I didn't want to face. Marcus watched them, these three people who'd spent years hurting each other, finally starting to see each other clearly. Edward knew this would happen, he said. They all turned to look at him. He knew that leaving me the money would force you to confront things you'd been avoiding. He knew it would hurt, but he also knew it might heal you. Richard nodded slowly. He was always playing the long game, even from his deathbed. He loved you, Marcus said. All of you. He just didn't know how to show it. So he showed it the only way he knew how, by creating a situation where you'd have to choose who you wanted to be. Catherine's voice was thick. And we almost chose wrong. Almost doesn't count. What matters is what you do now. The room fell silent. Then Richard turned from the window. The foundation, he said. The Edward Sterling Foundation. I want to help fund it. Personally. Not from the company, from my own accounts. Catherine straightened. Me too. I want to contribute. Marcus looked at them both. You don't have to do that. We know, Richard said. That's exactly why we want to. For the first time since he'd received the news, Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. The weight he'd been carrying, the fear that he wasn't worthy, that he'd somehow fail Edward's trust, began to lift. Okay, he said. Then let's do this together. Thomas began gathering his papers. I'll need to restructure the foundation documents to include additional board members. Richard, Catherine, Grace, if you're all willing to serve. We are, Catherine said. She looked at her brother, then at Grace, then at Marcus. We all are. They filed out of the conference room slowly, the tension of the past weeks finally beginning to dissolve. In the hallway, Catherine stopped Marcus with a hand on his arm. Mr. Thompson. Marcus, please. She hesitated. Marcus, I said terrible things about you, to your landlord, to people in your neighborhood. I tried to destroy your reputation because I was angry and scared, and I didn't know any other way to fight. Marcus waited. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to tell everyone I was wrong. I'm going to make sure your son never hears another cruel word because of something I did. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm just trying to undo some of the damage. She took a breath. My father was right about you. You're a good man, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. She walked away before Marcus could respond. Grace appeared at his side. That's the first time I've ever heard Catherine apologize for anything, she said. In my entire life. People can change. I'm starting to believe that. Grace touched her belly. I'm due in 6 weeks. Will you come to the hospital when the baby's born? I wouldn't miss it. Good, because this little guy is going to need his godfather from day one. Marcus smiled. I'll be there. He walked out of the law firm into the afternoon sunlight. The city looked different somehow, brighter, more full of possibility than it had been just hours ago. His phone buzzed. A text from the school Noah Thompson checked out early by authorized guardian. Marcus frowned. He hadn't authorized anyone to pick up Noah. Then another text came through from a number he didn't recognize. Your son is safe. Bill Hendricks picked him up. We had a surprise for you. Come to the park on Maple Street. Marcus's heart was pounding as he drove. Bill Hendricks, his supervisor at the resort. What was going on? He pulled up to the small park near their apartment, and then he stopped. There was Noah running across the grass laughing. Bill was there pushing him on the swings. Mrs. Chen from the apartment building stood nearby with a casserole dish. Mr. Kowalski, the old man with the cough, sat on a bench looking healthier than Marcus had seen him in months. A banner hung between 2 trees. Thank you, Marcus. Noah spotted him and came running. Dad, Dad, they threw you a party. Marcus knelt down and caught his son in his arms. What is this? We heard about what happened, Bill said, walking over. The whole story. Not the lies the Sterling family was spreading, the real story. About the fire. About you saving that man's life. About the inheritance. Word got around, Mrs. Chen added. That lawyer, Mr. Reed, he made sure people knew the truth. Mr. Kowalski shuffled over. You fixed my radiator last winter. Didn't charge me a penny. Told me to use the money for medicine instead. You drove Mrs. Patterson to her chemotherapy appointments for 6 months, Bill said. Never asked for gas money. You gave my grandson your last $20 when he needed bus fare to get to his job interview, someone else called out. People kept appearing, neighbors, co-workers, people Marcus had helped over the years without ever thinking twice. We wanted you to know, Bill said, his voice rough. We wanted you to know that we see you, that we know who you are, and that you deserve everything good that's coming to you. Marcus couldn't speak. Noah tugged on his hand. "Dad, are you crying?" "Yeah, bud." Marcus wiped his eyes. "But it's the good kind of crying." "I didn't know there was a good kind." "There is. It's when you find out that people care about you, that you're not as alone as you thought." Noah looked around at all the people gathered in the park. "We were never alone, Dad. Were we?" Marcus pulled his son close. "No, buddy. I guess we never were." The party in the park lasted until sunset. People Marcus had helped over the years kept appearing, some he remembered, some he didn't. They brought food and stories and gratitude he'd never expected. When it was finally over, and Marcus carried a sleeping Noah back to their apartment, he found an envelope taped to the door. No return address, just his name in familiar handwriting. He opened it after putting Noah to bed. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note from Richard Sterling. "For Noah's surgery, don't wait for the inheritance paperwork. Get it scheduled now. Consider this an advance against what my father owed you, though honestly, we both know no amount of money could cover that debt. Richard." Marcus sat at the kitchen table and stared at the check for a long time. The next morning, he called the cardiac specialist who'd been treating Noah. The same doctor who'd told Marcus 2 years ago that his son needed surgery, but that his insurance wouldn't cover it. The same doctor who'd watched Marcus's face crumble and offered a payment plan that would have taken 30 years to complete. "Dr. Patel, this is Marcus Thompson, Noah's father." "Mr. Thompson, is everything okay? Is Noah?" "He's fine. He's stable. But I need to schedule that surgery we talked about, the valve replacement." A pause. "Mr. Thompson, we discussed the costs. Has something changed with your insurance?" "Something's changed." Marcus looked at the check in his hand. "I can pay." Dr. Patel was quiet for a moment. "The full amount we're talking about over $200,000 with the hospital stay and follow-up care." "I can pay. When's the soonest you can do it?" "Let me check our surgical calendar. Can you hold?" Marcus held. He listened to the tinny hold music and thought about all the times he'd sat in that same waiting room watching Noah get tested, watching the numbers on the monitors, watching his son's brave face, and knowing he couldn't afford to save him. Dr. Patel came back on the line. "We have an opening in 3 weeks, April 15th. Can you make that work?" "I'll make it work." "Mr. Thompson, I don't know what happened, but I'm happy for you, for both of you. Noah's a good kid. He deserves this chance." "Thank you, doctor, for everything." Marcus hung up and sat in the silence of his apartment. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks his son would have the surgery that would save his life. He put his head down on the table and cried. The inheritance paperwork took 6 weeks to complete. Thomas Reed guided Marcus through every step, the tax implications, the account transfers, the legal structures that would protect the money and ensure it was used the way Edward Sterling intended. Marcus signed document after document, his hand cramped, his eyes blurred. But he kept signing because every signature brought him closer to making Edward's vision real. "That's the last one," Thomas finally said, setting down his pen. "Congratulations, Mr. Thompson. You're officially one of the wealthiest men in the state." Marcus looked around the law office. Nothing felt different. He was still the same man who'd woken up at 5:30 a.m. every day for years, who'd packed peanut butter sandwiches and worried about rent and prayed his truck would start one more time. "I don't feel wealthy," he said. Thomas smiled. "That's probably why Edward chose you." The first thing Marcus did with the money after Noah's surgery was pay off his medical debt. $340,000 gone with a single wire transfer. The collection agencies stopped calling. The threatening letters stopped arriving. He paid off Mr. Kowalski's medical bills too anonymously, and Mrs. Chen's back rent, and the mortgage for Bill Hendricks's daughter, who'd been struggling since her husband lost his job. "You have to stop," Grace told him over coffee one morning. Her belly was enormous now, she was due any day. You can't personally pay off every debt for everyone you've ever met. Why not? Because that's not sustainable, and it's not what Edward wanted. Marcus frowned. He wanted me to help people. He wanted you to build something that would help people for generations, not just write checks until the money runs out. Grace leaned forward. That's what the foundation is for. A system, a structure, something that will outlast both of us. She was right. Marcus knew she was right. But it was hard to think about systems and structures when people he cared about were suffering right now. We need to get the foundation operational, Grace continued. Richard and Catherine have been working on the legal framework. They've donated $50 million between them. We have office space staff lined up a board of directors. What we need is you. Me. You're the face of this, Marcus. You're the reason it exists. Edward chose you because of who you are, and that's what the foundation needs. Someone who understands what it's like to struggle. Someone who can look at an application and see a human being, not just a number. Marcus thought about all the forms he'd filled out over the years. Welfare applications, Medicaid paperwork, payment plans and hardship deferrals, and desperate letters to creditors. He remembered how dehumanizing it felt, reducing your entire life to boxes and check marks, hoping someone on the other end would see you as a person worth helping. Okay, he said. Tell me what you need me to do. The Edward Sterling Foundation opened its doors 3 months later. The building wasn't fancy. Marcus had insisted on that. No marble floors or leather furniture. Just a clean, bright space in a working-class neighborhood close to bus lines and public transit. The kind of place where people who needed help wouldn't feel intimidated walking through the door. Marcus was there on opening day watching families file in. Single mothers with crying babies. Elderly couples clutching stacks of medical bills. Young people who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. He knew their faces. He'd worn their expressions. He understood the mixture of hope and shame that came with asking for help. Mr. Thompson. A woman approached him holding a toddler on her hip. I'm sorry, I just wanted to say my name's Maria. I work nights at the hospital, cleaning. I heard about this place from my supervisor. Welcome, Maria. How can we help? Her eyes filled with tears. My daughter. She needs glasses. The school says she can't see the board. But my insurance doesn't cover vision, and I can't afford... She stopped, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be bothering you with this. You're not bothering me. Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with the little girl. She had dark curly hair and big brown eyes that squinted slightly. Hey there. What's your name? Sophia, the girl whispered. Sophia. That's a beautiful name. How old are you? She held up 4 fingers. 4 years old. Wow. And you need glasses so you can see better. Sophia nodded solemnly. Marcus stood and looked at Maria. We can help with that. Go talk to Janet at the front desk, she'll get you set up. And Maria. Yes. You're doing an amazing job, working nights raising your daughter on your own. That takes more strength than most people will ever understand. Maria's tears spilled over. Thank you. Thank you so much. She walked away with Sophia, and Marcus watched them go. Such a small thing, a pair of glasses for a child. Less than $200. But for Maria, it might as well have been $2 million. That was the Foundation's mission. Not just the big dramatic saves, but the small ones. The ones that fell through the cracks. The ones that society deemed too insignificant to address. Edward had understood that. Marcus was beginning to understand it too. Richard called him that afternoon. How's the opening going? Busy. Good busy. Marcus stepped outside to take the call. We've already processed 30 applications. Mostly medical bills, some rent assistance, a few emergency situations. I saw the numbers this morning. The staff you hired is excellent. Janet especially, she's got a gift for making people feel comfortable. She reminds me of someone I used to know. Marcus paused. Actually, she reminds me of Emily. Richard was quiet for a moment. Your wife. She had this way of looking at people, like she could see past all the walls they put up, like she understood what they really needed, even when they couldn't say it themselves. She sounds remarkable. She was. Marcus cleared his throat. Listen, Richard, I wanted to thank you for the check you sent before the paperwork went through. Noah's surgery was successful. He's recovering faster than the doctors expected. I'm glad. That boy deserves a healthy life. And I wanted to thank you for something else, for changing, for being willing to change. I know it's not easy, especially when you've spent your whole life one way. Shred. Richard laughed quietly. It's harder than anything I've ever done, including building a business. At least with business, the rules are clear. You want profit, you make decisions that generate profit. But this, trying to be a good person, there's no manual for that. No, there isn't. You just figure it out as you go. Is that what you've been doing all these years? Marcus thought about it. I guess so. Making it up as I go. Trying to do what Emily would have wanted. Trying to be the kind of father Noah deserves. Well, you've been figuring it out better than most. Richard paused. I have something to tell you. Catherine and I have been talking about the company. What about it? We want to implement some changes. Employee profit sharing, better healthcare coverage, childcare subsidies for working parents. Richard's voice was careful, like he was testing each word before speaking it. We want to make Sterling Properties the kind of company our father should have built. Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. He would be proud of you, Richard. Both of you. You think so? I know so. That's what he wanted all along. Not for you to give away your money, for you to use it differently. To see people as people instead of numbers on a spreadsheet. It's strange, Richard said. I've spent my whole life trying to earn his approval. And now that he's gone, I finally understand what he was trying to tell me. Better late than never. I suppose so. Richard cleared his throat. I should let you get back to work. But Marcus, thank you for not giving up on us, for believing we could change. That's what Edward believed. I just inherited his faith along with his money. Marcus hung up and stood in the afternoon sunlight watching people come and go from the foundation. Each one carrying their own struggles, their own hopes, their own stories. He thought about Edward Sterling, watching him from a distance for 4 years. Taking notes, keeping records, waiting for the right moment to reveal what he'd planned. I hope I'm doing this right, Marcus whispered to no one. I hope I'm making you proud. A month later, Grace went into labor. Marcus got the call at 2 a.m. He woke Noah, threw on clothes, and drove to the hospital faster than he should have. When he burst into the maternity ward waiting room, Catherine was already there. She's been in labor for 3 hours, Catherine said. They say it's going well, but she wanted you here. I'm here. Marcus sat down, his heart still racing. I'm here. They waited together. Marcus, Catherine, Richard, who arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing his suit from an evening business event. 3 people who'd been strangers 6 months ago, now bound together by grief and hope and the unexpected gift of a dying man. I used to hate hospitals, Catherine said quietly. The smell, the sounds. All those years watching Father get sicker, spending money on treatments that never worked. I know that feeling, Marcus said. When Emily was sick, I spent so much time in hospitals that I started dreaming about them. Even now, sometimes I wake up and think I'm back in her room watching the monitors, waiting for the numbers to change. Richard looked at him. How did you survive it, losing her? I didn't have a choice. Noah needed me. Bills needed to be paid. Life kept moving whether I was ready or not. Marcus stared at the floor. You don't survive grief. You just learn to carry it. I never learned how to carry anything, Catherine said. When things got hard, I just threw money at them, or ignored them, or blamed someone else. She laughed bitterly. That's what privilege does to you. It makes you weak in all the ways that matter. You're learning now, Marcus said. That counts for something. Does it? Sometimes I feel like I'm just playing a part, like I'm pretending to be a good person without actually being one. Everyone feels that way sometimes. The difference is whether you keep trying. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Thompson, Ms. Sterling is asking for you. Marcus stood. Catherine and Richard both moved to follow, but the nurse shook her head. Just Mr. Thompson, for now. Marcus walked down the hallway, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum. The nurse led him to a room at the end of the corridor and pushed open the door. Grace was propped up in the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. And in her arms, wrapped in a blue blanket, was the smallest human being Marcus had ever seen. Hey, Grace whispered. Come meet your godson. Marcus approached the bed slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement might break the spell. The baby was tiny, red-faced, wrinkled, impossibly perfect. His name is Edward James, Grace said, after his grandfather and his father. Edward James. Marcus reached out and touched the baby's hand. Tiny fingers wrapped around his pinky and held on. He's beautiful, Grace. He's healthy, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Strong lungs, you should have heard him scream when he came out. She smiled through her exhaustion. The doctors say everything looks perfect. Marcus felt tears building behind his eyes. James would be so proud of you. I know. Grace's voice caught. I know he would. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the baby sleep. Outside, the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I was thinking, Grace said quietly, about what Edward, my grandfather, wrote in his letter to you, about how wealth doesn't make a man good, kindness does. I remember. When I met James, I thought I understood that. I thought choosing love over money meant I'd figured out the secret to life. She looked at her son. But it's more complicated than that, isn't it? It's not just about what you choose, it's about what you do every day. The small choices, the ones no one sees. That's what makes it hard. Anyone can make one good choice. Living your whole life that way, that's the challenge. Do you think I can do it? Raise him right. Teach him to be good. Marcus looked at her. This woman who'd lost everything and built herself back up, who'd chosen love and paid the price, who was now holding the future in her arms. I think, he said, that anyone who worries about being a good parent probably already is one. Grace smiled. You sound like Edward. I'll take that as a compliment. It's meant as one. She shifted the baby in her arms. Will you hold him just for a minute? Marcus hesitated. I'm not sure I remember how. It's been 8 years since Noah was this small. It's like riding a bike. You never really forget. She placed little Edward James in Marcus's arms. The baby was so light, barely anything at all, and yet Marcus could feel the weight of possibility in that small body. A whole life ahead of him. A whole world of choices to make. Hey, little man, Marcus whispered. I'm your godfather. That means it's my job to help your mom keep you safe and teach you how to be a good person. He smiled down at the tiny face. Your grandfather believed that kindness matters more than money, and your dad taught kindergarten because he wanted to help kids. You've got a lot to live up to, but I think you're going to be just fine. The baby yawned, stretched his tiny arms, and went back to sleep. Marcus looked at Grace. You did good. We did good, she corrected. All of us. Together. When Marcus finally left the hospital, the sun was fully up. He drove home in a daze, his mind still full of everything that had happened. Noah was awake when he got there, sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal. How is she? Noah asked. Miss Grace and the baby. They're both perfect. Marcus sat down across from his son. You want to go visit them later? Meet your new godbrother? Noah's eyes widened. I have a godbrother. You do now. His name is Edward James. He's about this big. Marcus held his hands about a foot apart. And he's got a lot of people who love him. That's good. Noah stirred his cereal thoughtfully. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Remember when you told me that doing good things isn't about getting paid back? I remember. Is that still true? Even now that we have money? Marcus leaned back in his chair. It was a good question. A hard question. The kind of question that showed his son was paying attention, thinking about things that mattered. It's more true now than ever, he said finally. Before, when we didn't have money, being kind was easy. We didn't have anything to lose. But now being kind is a choice we have to make every single day. We have to choose to see people instead of walking past them. We have to choose to help even when we could just as easily ignore the problem. That sounds harder. It is harder. That's why most rich people don't do it. They get so used to their comfort that they forget what struggling feels like. They stop seeing the people around them as people. But we won't forget. Right, Dad? Marcus reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. We won't forget. I promise. And if we ever start to forget, we'll remind each other. Noah smiled. Deal. They finished breakfast together, father and son, in the small apartment that no longer felt quite so small. They were moving soon. Marcus had bought a house with a yard just like he'd planned, but part of him would miss this place. These thin walls that let you hear the neighbors. This cramped kitchen where he'd made 1,000 peanut butter sandwiches. This life they'd built together out of nothing but love and determination. Dad, Noah said as they cleared the dishes. Yeah, bud. I'm glad you caught Miss Grace that day, at the funeral. I'm glad you helped her. Marcus thought about that moment. The pregnant woman falling. The family turning their backs. His instinct taking over before his mind could catch up. Me too, son. Me too. Do you think Mr. Edward is watching from heaven or wherever? Marcus looked out the window at the morning sky. I think so, he said. I think he's been watching this whole time, and I think he finally knows his money ended up exactly where it was supposed to be. Noah nodded seriously. That's good, because I think he'd be really proud of you, Dad. Marcus pulled his son into a hug. I think he'd be proud of both of us. They stood there in the morning light, holding each other, two people who'd been through fire and come out the other side, changed, stronger, ready for whatever came next. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars drove past. People hurried to work. Life went on as it always did. But somewhere in that city, a foundation was opening its doors. A family was healing. A baby was sleeping in his mother's arms. And a groundskeeper's kindness was changing the world one small act at a time. 1 year passed. Marcus stood at the window of his new office at the Edward Sterling Foundation, watching the morning traffic below. The building had grown since opening day. They'd expanded into the adjacent property, hired 30 more staff members, and processed over 12,000 applications for assistance. 12,000 families. 12,000 stories of struggle and hope. 12,000 chances to do what Edward Sterling had believed Marcus could do. His phone buzzed. A text from Noah. Dad, don't forget, school play tonight, 7 p.m. You promised. Marcus smiled and typed back, I'll be there, front row, wouldn't miss it. A knock at his door made him turn. Grace stood in the doorway, little Edward James balanced on her hip. The baby was almost a year old now. Chubby cheeks, curious eyes, a smile that could light up any room. You ready? Grace asked. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Ready as I'll ever be. They walked together down the hallway. The foundation's walls were covered with photos. Now families they'd helped, events. They'd hosted volunteers who'd given their time. Each image told a story. Each face represented a life that had been changed. I got the numbers from last quarter, Grace said as they walked. We've distributed over $40 million in direct assistance. Medical bills, rent, utilities, childcare. And the job training program Richard funded has placed 200 people in full-time employment. That's good? That's really good. It is, but there's something else. Grace stopped walking and turned to face him. We got a letter yesterday, from the city council. They want to name a street after Edward. Marcus blinked. A street? Sterling Way. They're proposing it for the block where the original motel stood, where he started everything. What did Catherine say? She cried. Richard too, though he'll never admit it. Grace shifted Edward James to her other hip. They want you to speak at the dedication ceremony, next month. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Public speaking wasn't his strength. He'd spent his whole life staying invisible, staying quiet, letting his actions speak louder than words. I'm not sure I'm the right person for that. You're exactly the right person. You're the reason any of this is happening. Grace reached out and touched his arm. Edward chose you because of who you are, Marcus. Not just because you saved his life, because you lived your values every single day. That's what people need to hear. That's what will inspire them to do the same. Before Marcus could respond, Catherine appeared at the end of the hallway. There you are. The board is waiting. She walked toward them, her heels clicking on the floor. She looked different than she had a year ago, softer, somehow less armored. And Marcus, I need to talk to you after the meeting. Something's come up. Good something or bad something? Catherine smiled. It was still strange to see her smile a year ago. Marcus would have said she didn't know how. Good something. Very good something. But it can wait until after. The board meeting lasted 2 hours. They reviewed financials, discussed expansion plans, approved new programs. Richard presented a proposal for partnering with local hospitals to cover emergency medical costs for uninsured patients. Catherine outlined a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. Marcus listened more than he spoke. That was his role in these meetings, the moral compass Grace called him, the one who asked whether a program would actually help people or just look good on paper. What about the waiting list? Marcus asked during a pause in the discussion. Last I checked, we had over 1,000 applications pending. Families who need help now, not next quarter. We're processing them as fast as we can, one of the staff members said. But our resources are stretched thin. We could approve more applications if we reduce the assistance amounts. No. Marcus's voice was firm. If we're going to help people, we help them properly. Half measures don't change lives. They just delay the inevitable. Richard nodded. Marcus is right. We need to find additional funding, not reduce what we're offering. I have an idea about that, Catherine said. But let's discuss it after the meeting. When the board finally adjourned, Marcus stayed in his seat while the others filed out. His mind was full, so many needs, so many families waiting for help. No matter how much they did, it never felt like enough. You okay? Grace asked, pausing at the door. Just thinking. About whether we're really making a difference, or just putting bandages on wounds that need surgery. Grace walked back and sat down across from him. Edward James was asleep in her arms, his small chest rising and falling steadily. You remember what you told me once about how you learned to be kind? I don't remember saying anything profound. You said you just did what Emily would have wanted, what your son needed you to be. Grace looked at him with those clear, steady eyes. That's how change happens, Marcus. Not through grand gestures or revolutionary programs, through individual choices made every day by ordinary people who refuse to look away. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing, like I should be doing more. You're helping 12,000 families. You've created jobs, saved marriages, kept kids in school. You've given people hope when they had none. Grace leaned forward. Edward Sterling spent his whole life building a fortune. You've spent 1 year building something better, a community, a family, a legacy that actually means something. Marcus looked at the sleeping baby in her arms. Edward James, named for 2 men who'd changed the world in different ways. He would have loved this, Marcus said quietly. James, your husband. He would have loved being part of this. Grace's eyes glistened. He would have. He used to say that the best thing about teaching wasn't the summers off. It was watching kids discover they were capable of more than they believed. That's what you're doing here, showing people they're capable of more. Marcus nodded slowly. He thought about all the applications he'd read over the past year. The single mother who'd written about working 3 jobs and still falling behind. The veteran who couldn't afford the medication that kept his PTSD manageable. The teenager aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. Each one was a person. Each one mattered. "Okay," he said, straightening in his chair. "Tell Catherine I'm ready to hear her idea." Catherine's idea was bigger than Marcus expected. They met in her office, smaller than the conference room, more personal. Richard was there too, along with Thomas Reed, who'd become something like a permanent fixture in their lives. "We've been approached by 3 other philanthropists," Catherine said, spreading documents across her desk. "Old money families, all of them. They've been watching what we're doing with the foundation. They want in." Marcus frowned. "Want in how?" "They want to contribute. Substantially." Catherine pointed to the figures. "Combined, they're offering $200 million over the next 5 years, matching funds for everything we raise independently." $200 million. Marcus let the number sink in. That would double their capacity, triple it maybe. They could eliminate the waiting list, expand into other cities, help tens of thousands more families. "What do they want in return?" he asked. "That's the interesting part." Richard stepped forward. "They don't want naming rights, don't want board seats, don't want any of the usual ego-stroking that comes with big donations." "Then what?" Catherine and Richard exchanged a look. "They want to meet you," Catherine said. "They want to understand how you do it, how you built something that actually works, that actually changes lives instead of just generating tax deductions and good press." Marcus sat back in his chair. "I don't know what to tell them. I didn't build a system. I just tried to help people." "That's exactly what they want to hear." Thomas Reed spoke for the first time. "Marcus, do you understand how rare this is? Philanthropy is full of well-intentioned failures. Foundations that spend more on overhead than actual assistance. Programs designed by people who've never experienced poverty trying to solve problems they don't understand." "You're different," Catherine added. "You know what it's like to struggle. You know what people actually need, not what wealthy donors think they need. That's valuable. That's worth more than money." Marcus thought about it. He thought about all the charities that had rejected his applications over the years. The programs with complicated eligibility requirements designed to exclude as many people as possible. The bureaucratic maze that kept help away from those who needed it most. "Okay," he said. "Set up the meeting. But I want Grace there too, and Richard. This isn't about me. It's about what we've all built together." "Deal," Catherine said. And then she did something unexpected. She walked around the desk and hugged him. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, unsure how to respond. A year ago, this woman had tried to destroy him, had called him a thief and a fraud, had threatened to take everything away. Now she was hugging him like family. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, "for not giving up on us." Marcus hugged her back. "Thank you for being worth not giving up on." The months that followed were the busiest of Marcus's life. The meeting with the other philanthropists went well, better than well. They'd expected a pitch, a presentation, a polished performance. Instead, Marcus just talked. About Emily. About Noah. About the years of struggle that had taught him what people really needed when they were drowning. "It's not complicated," he told them. "You see someone struggling, you help them. You don't make them jump through hoops. You don't judge them for being poor. You just help." "But how do you prevent abuse?" one of the philanthropists asked. "How do you make sure people don't take advantage?" Marcus shrugged. "Some people will. That's just reality. But most people don't want handouts, they want a chance. They want someone to believe in them. If you spend all your time worrying about the few who might abuse the system, you end up punishing the many who genuinely need help. The philanthropists had looked at each other, and then they'd signed the commitment letters, all three of them, right there in the conference room. $200 million for the Edward Sterling Foundation, for families who were struggling just like Marcus had struggled. News of the donation made headlines. Reporters wanted interviews. Television shows wanted segments. Marcus turned most of them down. He wasn't comfortable with fame, didn't want to become a celebrity. But one interview he agreed to. A journalist named Sarah Chen from a small local paper. She'd written about poverty for years, covered the stories that bigger outlets ignored. "Why did you say yes to me?" Sarah asked when they sat down together. "You've turned down the Times, the Post, all the big names." "Because you actually care," Marcus said. "I've read your work. You write about people, not statistics. You understand that every number represents a human being with a story." Sarah smiled. "That's what I try to do." "Then write about the foundation. Not about me, about the people we help. Tell their stories. Show readers what poverty really looks like and what it means when someone reaches out a hand." The article Sarah wrote went viral. Not because of Marcus, he barely appeared in it, but because of the families she interviewed. The mother who'd been able to keep her house after the foundation covered her medical bills. The teenager who'd gotten into college with a scholarship the foundation provided. The veteran who was finally getting treatment for his PTSD. Real stories. Real people. Real change. The donations poured in after that. Not just from wealthy philanthropists, but from ordinary people. $5 here, $20 there. Notes attached that said things like, "I know what it's like to struggle. Thank you for helping others." Marcus read every note, every single one. Spring arrived, and with it the dedication ceremony for Sterling Way. The block where Edward Sterling had built his first motel was transformed for the occasion. A small stage had been erected. Chairs lined the street. A banner hung between two lampposts. Sterling Way, in honor of Edward Sterling and the legacy of kindness. Marcus arrived early before the crowds gathered. He stood on the corner where the motel had once stood, trying to imagine what it had looked like 60 years ago. A young man with a dream, working 18-hour days, building something from nothing. He would have hated all this fuss. Marcus turned. Richard was standing behind him, hands in his pockets, looking at the banner. The ceremony. The attention. The recognition. Richard walked closer. Father was never comfortable being celebrated. He always said the work was what mattered, not the credit. Sounds like someone I know. Richard smiled slightly. Maybe we're more alike than I realized. He and I. He paused. He and you. They stood in silence for a moment, two men who'd come a long way from that first hostile confrontation in Marcus's apartment. "I want to tell you something," Richard said finally. "Something I've never told anyone." "Okay." "The day Father died, I wasn't there. I was in a meeting. A stupid, pointless meeting about quarterly projections that could have waited." Richard's voice was rough. "Catherine was with him. She called me, said he was asking for me, and I told her I'd be there in an hour." Marcus waited. "He was gone before I arrived. The last words he ever said to me were asking where I was, and I wasn't there because I prioritized work over family. Just like I'd done my whole life." "Richard..." "Let me finish." Richard took a breath. "I've spent the past year trying to make up for that, trying to be the son he deserved instead of the one I was. And every time I make a decision that prioritizes people over profit, I think about that meeting. I think about what I should have done. You're making different choices now. That matters." "Does it? Can you really make up for a lifetime of selfishness with a year of good intentions?" Marcus thought about the question. It was a question he'd asked himself many times about his own failures, his own regrets, the things he wished he'd done differently. "I don't think it's about making up for the past," he said slowly. I think it's about who you choose to be going forward. Your father understood that. That's why he gave me the money, not because I was perfect, but because he believed I'd keep trying to be better." Richard nodded slowly. "Keep trying. That's all any of us can do, isn't it? That's all any of us can do." The ceremony started at noon. Hundreds of people gathered, foundation staff, families. They'd helped, city officials, reporters. Catherine spoke first, sharing memories of her father. That surprised Marcus. The demanding businessman he'd heard about was there, but so was another side. A man who'd secretly paid for his employees' children to attend college, who'd quietly funded a homeless shelter for 30 years, without ever taking credit. "My father wasn't perfect," Catherine said, her voice steady, despite the tears on her cheeks. "He made mistakes. He wasn't always there when we needed him. But he believed in something bigger than himself. He believed that people are fundamentally good and that kindness can change the world. The foundation that bears his name is proof of that belief. And the man who runs it," she looked at Marcus, "is the living embodiment of everything my father hoped his legacy would represent." Then it was Marcus's turn. He walked to the microphone, his heart pounding. The crowd watched him expectantly. So many faces, so many stories. Noah was in the front row, sitting between Grace and baby Edward James. The boy gave his father a thumbs up. Marcus took a breath. "I wasn't going to write a speech," he began. "I'm not good at speeches. I'm good at fixing things. Pipes, wiring, broken fences. That's who I am, a handyman, a groundskeeper, a guy who shows up early and stays late and does the work that needs doing." He paused. "A year and a half ago, I caught a pregnant woman before she fell at a funeral. I didn't think about it. I just saw someone who needed help, and I helped. That's not heroism. That's just being a decent human being. The kind of thing we should all do every day, without expecting anything in return." But Edward Sterling saw something different. He saw that small act as confirmation of something he'd believed for 4 years, that ordinary people doing ordinary good can change the world. "He left me his fortune not because I deserved it, but because he trusted me to use it the way he couldn't." Marcus looked at Richard and Catherine. "The Sterling family has spent this past year proving that people can change. That wealth doesn't have to mean selfishness. That it's never too late to choose kindness over comfort." He smiled. "Edward would be proud of them. I'm proud of them." He turned back to the crowd. "The foundation we've built isn't about me. It's not about the Sterlings. It's about all of you. The families who trusted us with their stories. The volunteers who give their time. The donors who give what they can, whether it's $5 or 5 million. Every day we get letters from people who say we saved their lives. But here's what I've learned: we're not saving anyone. We're just giving people a chance to save themselves, a chance to catch their breath, a chance to believe that someone sees them, that someone cares, that they're not alone." That's what Edward Sterling wanted. Not a monument or a street name. He wanted a world where people help each other, where kindness is normal, not exceptional, where no one has to choose between food and medicine, between rent and childcare, between their dignity and their survival. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "My wife Emily used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they give. She died 3 years before I ever heard Edward Sterling's name. But everything I've done since then, every choice I've made, every person I've tried to help, has been because of her. Because she taught me that kindness isn't weakness. It's the only strength that matters." He looked at Noah. "My son asked me once why I helped people when we were still poor. I told him it's because doing good things isn't about getting paid back. You do it because it's right." He straightened. "I still believe that. And I'll keep believing it until the day I die. Because that's who I am. That's who Edward Sterling saw when he watched me all those years. That's who I want my son to become. And that's who I hope all of you will choose to be." He stepped back from the microphone. For a moment there was silence. Then Noah stood up and started clapping. Grace joined him. Then Catherine, Richard, the foundation staff, the families, the crowd. The applause washed over Marcus like a wave. He'd never experienced anything like it, the sound of hundreds of people recognizing not his success, but his values. Not what he'd been given, but what he'd chosen to do with it. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed slowly. Marcus shook hands, accepted hugs, listened to stories. A woman told him the foundation had saved her daughter's life. A man said he'd gotten a job through the training program and was now supporting his family for the first time in years. A teenager said the scholarship had changed everything. She was the first person in her family to attend college. Every story was a reminder. Every face was proof that Edward's faith hadn't been misplaced. When the last guest had finally gone, Marcus found himself alone with Noah on the corner of Sterling Way. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Dad," Noah said. "Yeah, bud." I understood. Marcus looked at his son. "Understood what?" "What you said, about doing good things because it's right." Noah's face was serious, that same too-old seriousness he'd had since Emily died. "I understand now. It's not about getting paid back. It's about who you want to be." Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with his son. "When did you get so smart?" "I learned from you." Noah smiled. "And Mom. And Mr. Edward, even though I never met him. He would have loved you, Noah. He would have been so proud of the person you're becoming." "I'm proud of you too, Dad." Noah threw his arms around his father's neck. "For everything." Marcus held his son tight. Behind them, the Sterling Way sign caught the last light of the setting sun. A year ago, he'd been a groundskeeper struggling to survive. Now he was something else, not rich exactly, though he had more money than he could ever spend. Not famous, though, people knew his name. He was something simpler than that, something better. He was a father who'd kept his promise to his dying wife. A man who'd honored a stranger's faith. A human being who'd chosen kindness when the world had given him every reason to choose differently. "Dad." Noah pulled back from the hug. "Can we go visit Mr. Edward's grave? I want to tell him about the ceremony." Marcus smiled. "Yeah, bud. I think he'd like that." They drove to the cemetery together, father and son. The same cemetery where Marcus had worked as a groundskeeper, where he'd caught Grace before she fell, where everything had changed. Edward Sterling's grave was covered with flowers. People had been leaving them all day, some from family, some from strangers who'd been touched by his story. Marcus and Noah stood before the headstone. The inscription was simple. Edward Sterling, 1933, 2024. A man's wealth is not measured in money, but in the people he leaves behind. "Hey, Mr. Edward," Noah said quietly. "It's me, Noah. I'm Marcus's son. I just wanted to say thank you for believing in my dad, for helping us when we needed it most." Marcus put his hand on his son's shoulder. "The street dedication was today," Noah continued. "Sterling Way. There were a lot of people there. They all said nice things about you. And my dad gave a speech. He was really good." Noah looked up at his father, then back at the grave. "I want to be like him when I grow up, like both of you, I guess. Someone who helps people not because they want something back, but because it's the right thing to do." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small stone, smooth and white, polished by years of handling. "This was my mom's favorite rock. She found it on the beach the day she and Dad got married. She used to say it was good luck." He placed it gently at the base of the headstone. "I want you to have it, so you know we're thinking about you, so you know your luck helped us too." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't try to stop them. "Thank you, Edward," he said softly. "For everything, for trusting me when you had no reason to, for believing I could be more than I was, for giving my son a chance at a real life." He took a breath. "I promise I'll keep going, keep helping, keep being the man you saw in me, not because you're watching, but because it's who I am, who I've always been, who I'll always be." The evening air was cool, peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, a bird was singing. The last light of day filtered through the trees, dappling the grass with gold. "Come on, bud," Marcus said finally. "Let's go home." They walked back to the car together, hand in hand. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful. The grave was covered with flowers. And somewhere, Marcus believed Edward Sterling was finally at rest. His fortune had gone to someone who deserved it. His family had learned to love each other. His legacy was secure not in buildings or bank accounts, but in the lives that had been changed by his final act of faith. Marcus opened the car door for Noah, then paused. He looked back at the cemetery one last time. "I'll make you proud," he whispered. "Every day. For the rest of my life." Then he got in the car, started the engine, and drove his son home. The foundation was waiting. The work continued. The families who needed help were counting on him. And Marcus Thompson, groundskeeper, father-keeper of a billionaire's hope, was ready. Because he finally understood what Edward Sterling had known all along. Kindness isn't just something you do, it's who you are. And who you choose to be every single day is the only legacy that truly matters.